Keanu Reeves pulled up to his new villa. He didn't expect to witness something that would stop him in his tracks. His wealthy neighbor was cruelly yelling at his helpless dog. What the man didn't know was that his new neighbor wasn't someone who just looked the other way. It was Keanu Reeves. A sleek black car glided through the upscale streets of Silverwood, its tinted windows reflecting pristine lawns and grand estates. Inside, Keanu sat quietly, his fingers tracing the edge of the leather armrest as he gazed out at the peaceful scenery. The morning air was crisp, full of promise. This was more than a move. It was a new chapter. As the car neared the gates of his long-owned but never lived-in villa, Keanu rolled down the window, letting the breeze run through his hair. For over 10 years, this had been nothing more than a property on paper, rental agreements, management reports, distant updates. But today, it was becoming real. A buzz from his phone broke the moment. It was a message from his assistant, Patrick. Smiling slightly, Keanu tapped to call. "Good morning, Keanu," Patrick's voice came through, professional yet warm, like someone who's been by your side through thick and thin. "Just a heads up, I had the maids deep clean the villa all week. It should feel like a 5-star hotel by now." Keanu chuckled softly. "Thanks, Patrick," he said in his familiar gravelly tone. "But honestly, I'm hoping it feels more like home." There was a pause, then Patrick replied with a knowing smile in his voice, "Exactly what I meant. A place just for you, at least until your projects wrap up. Somewhere that actually feels personal." "I appreciate that," Keanu said sincerely, his eyes settling on the villa ahead. It was strange to own something for so long, yet only now see it as a possible home. "If you want," Patrick added, hesitating for just a second, "I can head over there. Be around if you need anything." "I really don't mind." Keanu shook his head, though Patrick couldn't see it. It was kind, but he had always preferred handling things on his own, especially in a world as chaotic as Hollywood. "No need, Patrick. I've got a butler here. I'll be fine. But I appreciate the offer, really." "You never change," Patrick said fondly. "But hey, call me anytime, day or night. I'm always here." The call ended, and Keanu smiled to himself. The car approached the ornate gates, which opened with a smooth hum, welcoming him to the property. His heart beat a little faster. This was it. The place he'd thought about but never stepped foot in. The car rolled to a stop. Keanu took a deep breath and stepped out, finally facing the villa. It was stunning, Mediterranean-style architecture with terracotta roof tiles glowing in the sunlight, white stucco walls, wrought iron balconies draped in vines, and wide windows promising light and warmth. As he stood taking it all in, a man approached. He was tall, neatly dressed, with a composed posture and gray-streaked hair. "Welcome, Mr. Reeves," he said with a slight bow. "I'm Melvin, your butler. We're honored to have you here. The staff is ready to assist with your bags whenever you wish to go inside." Keanu nodded, appreciating the formality but not quite ready to head indoors. The morning was too perfect, and the world outside too quiet and fresh to ignore. "Thank you, Melvin," Keanu said warmly. "But I think I'll take a walk around the neighborhood first while it's still cool. Could you have my bags brought in and my clothes ironed and placed in the wardrobe?" "Of course, sir," Melvin responded smoothly, signaling the staff without missing a beat. And just like that, Keanu turned and began his quiet stroll, completely unaware that his peaceful walk was about to turn into something much bigger, a confrontation he didn't ask for, but couldn't ignore. As the staff stepped forward to unload the luggage, moving with quiet efficiency, Keanu walked slowly toward the gate, his steps thoughtful. This place, once just a line on a financial report, was now going to be his actual home for the next few months. It was a strange feeling. He hoped to find more than just comfort behind those walls. He was looking for peace. For stillness. For something real. The thought both excited him and left him slightly uneasy. Keanu let his mind drift as he walked, thinking about the upcoming months. This wasn't just a change of scenery, it was part of his process. He'd chosen to live here while filming his latest project, hoping the space would help him dive deeper into his role, maybe even reconnect with himself a little. Then, a sharp bark cut through the quiet morning air. It pulled him out of his thoughts like a needle popping a balloon. A reminder that even in neighborhoods where perfection was carefully curated, real life, raw, messy, flawed, still found a way to show up. As he reached the gate, Keanu's attention locked onto a man walking just outside the property line, a middle-aged white man, dressed in luxury loungewear, earbuds in, dragging along a young brown ridgeback on a thick, heavy leash. The dog was beautiful, sleek coat, soft eyes, but something felt off. The collar looked tight, the leash far too harsh for an animal its size. The dog moved gingerly, like it had learned to walk on broken glass. Then, instinctively, it paused near the gate, lifted its leg to pee. What happened next made Keanu stop cold. The man's face twisted from blank to furious in an instant. He yanked the leash so violently, the dog nearly lifted off the ground. Bad. Stupid dog, the man snapped, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. You never learn, do you? Filthy animal. The dog whimpered, a soft, painful sound, and shrank to the ground, its tail tucked, its entire body trying to disappear. The man jerked the chain again, forcing the dog to stop midstream. For one terrifying second, it looked like he was going to kick it, his foot lifted slightly, then paused. That's when he noticed Keanu watching. And just like that, the storm vanished. The man's expression flipped into a warm, practiced smile, like someone had flipped a switch. He straightened, dropped the act of dominance, and waved as if they were old friends running into each other at brunch. Well, hello there, he called, cheerfully tugging the dog along as he approached. You must be the new owner of this beautiful villa. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Keanu hesitated. That sudden shift in behavior unsettled him, but he'd been in Hollywood long enough to keep his cool in moments like this. He stepped forward, calm and composed, and shook the man's hand. Nice to meet you, Keanu said evenly. I'm Keanu Reeves. The man's eyes lit up in recognition, his smile stretching wider. Of course. Of course. I've seen all your films. Brilliant work. Really brilliant. I'm Graham Whitlock. Been living here 25 years now, he said, gesturing grandly at the street like he owned it. Quite the community, huh? Keanu nodded, his gaze drifting to the dog now hiding behind Graham's legs, still trembling. Graham followed his gaze and let out a forced laugh. Don't mind old Rusty. Bit of a handful, but we're working on it. You know how rescue dogs can be. Keanu's brows lifted slightly. Something didn't add up. The dog didn't look challenging, it looked traumatized. But he held his thoughts back. No need to jump to conclusions. Not yet. I've seen people come and go from your villa over the years, Graham continued, eager to fill the silence. Short-term vacation stuff, right? Must be nice to finally stay here yourself. Keanu nodded. Yeah. First time, actually. I've owned it for over a decade, but it's always been a rental until now. Graham chuckled, another sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, don't worry. They were all good guests. No trouble. I'm sure you'll find our little neighborhood very welcoming. Then, with a flicker of pride in his voice, he added, I'm a bit of a local celebrity around here, you could say. Keanu raised an eyebrow, silently inviting him to go on. Graham leaned in a little. I'm a best-selling author and speaker in the self-help and New Age philosophy space, Graham explained, puffing out his chest with pride. My book The Path to Peaceful Power sold millions. I host retreats, give TED Talks, you name it. My online presence is quite significant, if I do say so myself. As Graham rattled off his accolades, Keanu's eyes drifted back to the dog, Rusty, he'd called him. The poor thing was still cowering behind Graham's legs, his body language screaming fear, tail tightly tucked, ears pinned back, body low to the ground, eyes flicking nervously between his owner and Keanu like he was waiting for the next explosion. I teach mindfulness, compassion, Authenticity, Graham continued, voice dripping with self-importance. It's all about cultivating inner peace and projecting that energy into the world. The irony of it hit Keanu like a cold wave. Minutes ago, this same man was verbally abusing his dog in broad daylight. And now he was talking about peace? Keanu kept a polite expression, but his thoughts were racing, already drawing a sharp contrast between Graham's polished public image and the disturbing reality of how he behaved when he thought no one was watching. As Graham continued his self-promotion, Keanu's attention was once again pulled to Rusty. The dog, still trembling from earlier, quietly lifted his leg near Keanu's flower garden, trying to relieve himself. He hadn't had a chance before. The way he moved, cautiously, anxiously glancing at Graham every few seconds, it was heartbreaking. Then Graham noticed. His confident mask cracked for just a second. His face flushed, and his hand clenched the leash tightly again. He yanked Rusty back with unnecessary force. "Oh, I do apologize," Graham said, his voice suddenly tight, the friendly tone slipping. "Rusty's being a bit naughty today." Keanu's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. The dog wasn't just shy, he was terrified. And now, up close, Keanu could see the signs more clearly, ribs sticking out, missing patches of fur, legs trembling from more than just nerves. This dog wasn't just poorly trained. He was being neglected, maybe even abused. Rusty's posture said it all. Head low. Tail locked under his body. Ears flat. Every movement full of fear. Graham caught Keanu staring and quickly tried to cover again, this time with overdone concern. "Well, I guess it's time I get this dirty beast home for a bath," he said lightly, though the tension in his voice was obvious. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Keanu. Welcome to the neighborhood." As Graham turned to leave, tugging Rusty behind him like a worn-out suitcase, Keanu couldn't stay silent any longer. "Is everything all right with your dog?" he asked calmly, but firmly. "He looks a little unwell. I actually know a great vet if you'd like a recommendation." Graham's smile tightened, just for a second, barely visible, but enough to catch. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger? Panic? Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished behind another smooth smile. "Oh, that's very kind of you," he said smoothly. "But Rusty's fine. He's a rescue. Got all his shots and checkups at the shelter, he's just adjusting to his new home." Keanu nodded, but he wasn't buying it. He'd known plenty of rescue dogs, and this was more than just an adjustment. This was fear embedded deep in the body. Sensing Keanu wasn't fully convinced, Graham pushed on. "We're working on helping him gain some weight," he said, lowering his voice to a confiding tone. "It takes time with these problematic breeds. You know how it is. Some patience and training, he'll be just fine." Before Keanu could say more, Graham suddenly changed the subject, again. "Oh, almost forgot," he said brightly. "We're hosting the neighborhood's 75th anniversary celebration at my place. You simply must come. Kids' activities, dog competitions, door prizes, the works. Everyone will be there." The abrupt shift caught Keanu off guard. He nodded slightly, still trying to process the twisted contrast between Graham's words and what he had just witnessed. "That sounds interesting," Keanu replied slowly, his thoughts still on Rusty. Keanu managed a polite smile. "I've got a meeting later this afternoon, but I appreciate the invitation." Graham nodded, offered one last practiced smile, and turned to leave, tugging Rusty behind him with a little too much force. Keanu watched them disappear down the street, the unease in his gut refusing to settle. Something about the entire encounter didn't sit right. The image Graham painted of himself, a calm, enlightened figure preaching mindfulness and compassion, stood in harsh contrast to the cruelty Keanu had just witnessed. It wasn't just unsettling, it was dangerous. The mask Graham wore in public was so polished, so convincing, that most people probably never questioned what lay underneath. As Keanu turned and walked back toward the villa, the morning no longer felt quite so perfect. The beauty of the neighborhood, the quiet luxury of Silverwood, all felt just a little hollow. Like a movie set, flawless on the surface, but empty behind the walls. And now, Keanu couldn't help but wonder, what else was hiding behind these manicured lawns and smiling neighbors? He stepped inside the villa, the cool interior offering welcome relief, not just from the sun, but from the emotional weight of what he'd just seen. The door closed softly behind him. The butler and maids were nowhere in sight, just as he preferred. That small gesture spoke volumes about their professionalism and Patrick's understanding of his need for space. As his eyes adjusted to the dimmer lighting, Keanu began to take in the details of the home. And for the first time, it actually felt like his. Every element had been thoughtfully curated. Patrick had clearly gone the extra mile. The living room didn't feel like a cold, designer showroom. It felt lived in, warm, inviting. On the walls, framed photographs, not art prints or random decor, but real memories. There was one of Keanu and his sisters, young and beaming. Another from the set of one of his first films, his expression nervous but full of drive. These weren't just photos. They were chapters of his life, placed here to remind him of who he was beyond the screen. The furniture was arranged for comfort, not for show. Deep leather chairs, a low coffee table, soft rugs, everything invited you to stay, not just pass through. He ran a hand across the back of one chair. Worn, but cared for. Just like him. The windows were wide open, letting in the breeze, and the lazy spin of ceiling fans replaced the sharp chill of air conditioning. In the background, leaves rustled and birds called from the garden, nature's quiet soundtrack, a world away from studio noise and paparazzi flashes. In one corner, a guitar waited on a stand, one of his favorites. Across the room, a small desk had been set up by the window, neatly arranged with the notebooks and pens he liked best. It was more than thoughtful. It was personal. Keanu wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Stainless steel and smooth wood blended perfectly, polished but welcoming. A bowl of fruit sat on the counter. He grabbed an apple, took a bite, and kept walking. As he neared the bar area, considering pouring himself a drink, a maid appeared with a tall glass of green juice. Perfectly mixed, kale, apple, spinach, cucumber, lime. Patrick. Keanu smiled. "Thank you," he said warmly, accepting the glass. The maid gave a quiet nod and disappeared just as gracefully, leaving Keanu alone again. He took a sip, savoring the flavor, letting the familiar taste ground him. It helped. For a few minutes, at least, it quieted the disquiet in his chest. Then he glanced at the wall clock. 9:30 a.m. Still a bit of time before his scheduled meeting. He settled into the couch and pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails while the gentle hum of ceiling fans and distant bird calls wrapped around him. For a moment, it felt like peace. Like maybe this place really could be what he hoped for, a quiet sanctuary during the chaos of filming. A real home. And then, a sound. High-pitched. Fragile. A whimper. Then, a howl. Keanu's head snapped up. His body froze, instincts flaring. The sound, sharp, painful, desperate, carried clearly, even through the space between houses. Rusty. Something was wrong. And Keanu Reeves, the man the world knew for his calm, suddenly felt anything but. The peaceful stillness from moments earlier was gone, shattered by that single, gut-wrenching sound. Now, the air buzzed with urgency. Keanu set his phone and juice aside, rising in one fluid motion. That wasn't just a bark. That was a cry of pain, sharp, desperate, unmistakable. And Keanu already had a sick feeling he knew who it was. He moved quickly, first heading out to the backyard near the pool, trying to triangulate the sound. Everything out there was picture perfect, sculpted hedges, a shimmering pool, lounge chairs arranged just so, but the beauty of the scene felt jarring, like it didn't belong to the same world as the distressing cries he'd just heard. Keanu scanned the neighboring properties, eyes darting across rooftops and fences, trying to locate the source. But the angle wasn't enough. Without hesitation, he went back inside and took the stairs 2 at a time, emerging onto the balcony with a full view of the property next door. His stomach dropped. There was Graham, entering the back of his house, his movements stiff and jerky, posture tense, like someone trying to hide the aftermath of rage. But the cries, they didn't stop. They were coming from behind a dense line of ornamental bushes. From this vantage point, Keanu could see what no one on the street ever could, that the bushes were carefully arranged to block the view. To hide something. Whatever was happening back there, it wasn't meant to be seen. Keanu's jaw clenched. The contrast between the man who preached compassion and the man whose dog cowered in fear, it was more than hypocrisy. It was cruelty, hiding in plain sight. He couldn't unsee it. But he also couldn't just rush in. Not yet. Graham clearly held influence here. His reputation, his connections, his spotless public image, all of it would make this situation harder to expose. One wrong move could make things worse for Rusty. Keanu took a deep breath, the California sun now burning against his skin instead of warming it. He turned away from the railing and stepped back inside. This wasn't just a break from Hollywood anymore. It wasn't just a place to rest and write. Now it was something else. A test of conscience. A choice between comfort and action. He paced the living room slowly, his mind spinning with what he'd seen and what it meant. The image of Rusty trembling, yelping, trying to shrink from view, it echoed in his head like a scene from a film that wouldn't stop replaying. He couldn't ignore it. Not now. But if he was going to do something, he had to do it right. He grabbed his phone and started typing. "Patrick, I need your help. There's a situation here that needs delicate handling. I suspect animal abuse next door. The neighbor's name is Graham Whitlock, claims to be a self-help author, big in New Age circles. I need you to clear my schedule today. And if possible, can you find anything on him, past complaints, rumors, anything involving animal treatment in this neighborhood?" He hit send. No hesitation. Then immediately dialed the film director he was scheduled to meet on Zoom. As the phone rang, he paced again, his free hand running through his hair. "Hey, this is Keanu," he said when the line picked up, voice steady despite the storm inside. "I'm calling about our meeting. Something urgent has come up. Would it be okay if we rescheduled?" He paused, listening to the director's concerned reply. "I understand, and I apologize. But this isn't something I can ignore. It's a sensitive situation. I believe there may be animal abuse happening next door. I can't go on with the day like nothing's wrong." The director's response was understanding, supportive, and Keanu was grateful. He promised to follow up soon and ended the call. Now there were no more distractions. Only one thing left to do: act. He headed downstairs with purpose, eyes scanning the villa until he spotted Malvin, the butler, moving quietly through the hall. Calm, composed, just as he always was. Keanu approached him. "Malvin," he said, lowering his voice, "I need your help with something, off the record." While adjusting the blinds, Malvin paused as Keanu quietly asked about the neighbors, especially Mr. Whitlock. After a moment of hesitation, Malvin admitted that guests had complained for nearly a year about disturbing dog whimpers coming from Whitlock's property. The excuse was always the same: a difficult rescue dog. Keanu pressed further. Malvin revealed that Graham, though respected, was feared. His wealth and status kept neighbors silent, even though staff had seen his rude, abusive behavior firsthand. Keanu's suspicion hardened into conviction. Something was deeply wrong. He thanked Malvin and prepared for the neighborhood event next door, selecting clothes casual enough to blend in, but flexible enough in case he needed to act. At 11 a.m., Keanu walked toward Whitlock's mansion. The decorations were lavish, the mood festive, but to Keanu, it all felt hollow. A staffer greeted him nervously and led him through a cold, luxurious house that felt more staged than lived in. When they reached the backyard, Graham welcomed Keanu loudly, introducing him to guests with a performative smile. Keanu mingled politely, all while searching for any sign of Rusty. Graham hovered nearby, even suggesting a joint self-help project. Keanu declined diplomatically, uninterested in collaborating with someone he no longer respected. On his way back inside, Keanu noticed a fenced side yard filled with dog obstacles, a competition area clearly meant for the event. The thought of forcing a traumatized dog like Rusty through that course infuriated him. The house showed no trace of a dog, no toys, no food bowls, nothing. Then, from beyond the obstacle course, Keanu heard a faint whimper. He followed it carefully, finding a hidden area behind thick bushes. There, tied to a pole, was Rusty, weak, shaking, visibly injured. No food, no water. Just silence, pain, and isolation. Keanu tried to help, using his hands to offer water from a nearby hose, which the dog clearly feared, another sign of abuse. Gently, he promised Rusty he would never have to suffer again. That's when Graham appeared. With thinly veiled hostility, he mocked Keanu for straying from the party. But Keanu had had enough. He confronted Graham about the dog's condition. Graham deflected at first, claiming Rusty was a troubled rescue. But as Keanu challenged him further, the mask dropped. Graham admitted he adopted Rusty as a PR stunt, a prop to boost his image as a compassionate guru. He resented the dog, saw it as worthless, and never intended to truly care for it. Keanu was stunned. The cruelty was real, and Graham showed no remorse. When Keanu threatened to expose him to the neighborhood, Graham laughed, confident that his influence would protect him. Realizing no one in the community would stand up, Keanu called 911, but without solid evidence, they couldn't act. Graham smugly offered the dog to Keanu, now that he no longer needed it for PR. Keanu accepted, but not with relief, with a quiet fury. Taking Rusty was the first step. Justice would come next. Leading Rusty through the party and out the front gate, Keanu didn't need to say a word. The silent judgment of the crowd, the whispers, the stunned expressions, they spoke volumes. His actions were a clear statement to a neighborhood that had chosen comfort over conscience. Back at his villa, Keanu gently carried Rusty inside. The dog, still anxious, clung close. Keanu instructed Malvin to prepare a warm bath and pick up supplies from the nearest pet store, gentle shampoo, food, medication, a soft bed. As they waited, Keanu called Martin, a friend who ran a local animal shelter. Martin promised to help and have a vet on standby. Keanu would bring Rusty in the next morning. When the bath was ready, Keanu insisted on doing it himself. Slowly, carefully, he cleaned Rusty, speaking softly the entire time. The dog trembled at first, but eventually began to trust, leaning into Keanu's touch. By the time it was over, Rusty was clean, calmer, and resting on a new bed in the corner of the living room. He curled up, safe for the first time in a long time. Keanu sat beside him, gently stroking his head. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Tomorrow, we start a new life." This wasn't the retreat Keanu had imagined when he came to Silverwood. But it had become something far more important, a mission to bring light into a place that preferred to live in shadow. And he was just getting started.